What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. On today's edition of Gear Gods Quality Control, we're going to be taking a look at the SYN single module preamp from Synergy Amps. So what's the deal with this thing? Why does it exist? Or what is it for? Who is it for? I'm going to try and answer all of these questions. It's a single module preamp. So you can take one of these Synergy preamps at a time and load them into the front and get the sound of that preamp. But where can you send it after that? Well, there's two basic uses for this thing. Number one, having it in your studio. If you're like a producer and you want to get different amp sounds on the fly, you can either use it to go straight into your DAW and use power amp sims and cab sims to get your guitar tone, or you can use it with a separate amplifier, power amp and cab, and mic up a cab, or any combination of the two. It also has its own built-in analog cab sim, so you can actually go directly from the unit into your DAW and record just that with no power amp sim or cab sim separate from what comes with the unit. The other use for it is basically adding an extra channel to any amplifier that has a series effects loop. So that's pretty sweet. If, say, you've got an amp that you really like, but it only has one channel and you want to expand it a little bit, you can actually use this in the effects loop of that amp to get a second channel. Or maybe you've got an amp like mine, the Generator 120 from Rev, and even though it has 4 channels, you want a wildcard slot where you can have literally a 5th channel in there that you can swap out any of the Synergy modules that they make. So here's me using it kind of desktop producer style. I'm going straight into the Synergy, from the Synergy into my Universal Audio Apollo Twin, and right into Pro Tools. And then within Pro Tools, I'm using the 2 Notes Wall of Sound 3. I'm using one of my own cabs, the Trey Xavier Dream Cab from Lancaster Audio, available in the Trey Xavier Producer Pack. I'm using the Wall of Sound Power Amp Sim. So I'm using like 6L6 tube amp simulation to get the power amp sound. And I really like the 2 Notes power amp sounds. You can use whatever kind of power amp sim and cab sim you like. That's the beauty of producing, is, you know, you can tweak with these things until you're dead. Right now I'm using the Friedman HBE module, and in front of that I'm using the Aris Effects Savage Drive, and here's what that tone sounds like. It's real easy to get a completely different tone out of this thing by swapping out the preamp, which I'm going to show you how to do right now. This is a Dietzel VH4 preamp, and let's see how that sounds. So all you got to do is just unscrew the thing on the sides like this. 1, 2, 3. There you go. You screw in these little screw diddles. Turn the thing back on. And of course, each of these modules has 2 channels, and it comes with a little foot switch, and you can change the channel on it if you like. Here's what it sounds like with the Dietzel VH4 instead. Pretty solid. So that's with everything else the same. All I did was swap out the preamp. Now here's the exact same tone, but instead of using the power amp sim and the cab sim from the 2 Notes, it's just the cab sim that's built into the SYN-1. To me, this doesn't sound nearly as good as using either a digital power amp and cab sim or the real deal, but in a pinch, it's way, way better than nothing, and you could totally go direct to front of house using just this. So that's how you use it in sort of a desktop producer scenario. Now I'm going to show you how to use it to add another channel to your existing amp. All right, now I'm going to show you how to use the SYN-1 to add not 1, but 2 new channels to any amp that has a series effects loop. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need 4 total cables. So make sure that you have plenty of spaghetti. Today we're using the 4-channel Rev Generator 120, and then with the SYN-1's 2 channels, we're going to have 6 total channels on this amp, which is beyond absurd, but you know, you never know. You might have absurd needs. or more likely you have a 1 or 2 channel amp that you want to expand to 3 or 4. So let's follow the signal flow for how it's going to go from your guitar to the sound coming out of the speaker. So the first thing you're going to do, green for go, you're actually going to plug into the front of the SYN-1, not the front of your amp, okay? And then this is coming from your guitar. So put that over here, plug it into the guitar, beep boop. So that's going in the front here, and then it's going to come out the back here. So we're going 2 amp effects return here, okay? We're going to go straight out of there into the effects return. Note that we have the level all the way up on this. Then from there, we're going out from the effects send into this spot here marked from amp effects send, and then out from the back here to amp in. And then that goes into the front input of the amp. So that might seem a little bit confusing and counterintuitive, but it's going to make complete sense in a minute when I explain how it works. So just like the 4-cable method for effects and modelers and stuff like that that you might use with a tube amp, this is going to go both in front of and in the loop of your amp. Because when we use this bypass switch, that takes this out of the signal entirely and puts this signal straight from here into the front of your amp instead of having it in the loop. When you do this, it's on and in the loop. And the reason that that has to be is so that you can bypass the preamp section of your amp entirely and use this as the preamp, because when it goes into the return of the effects loop, it's going straight into the power amp, and then from there into the cab, or in this case, into the 2-note torpedo reload, and then into a cab sim in Pro Tools. Now that we've got it all set up, I'm going to demonstrate how it works having 6 channels on this amp now. Check it out. So currently we have the SYN-1 bypassed. That means it's out of the signal chain entirely. The signal is going direct into here and then out of here and back into the front input of the amp. So if we go to channel 1 on the rev, I don't have the foot switch for the rev with me right now, but just imagine that you've got your whatever foot switch for whatever amp it is that you use, and you're using that to switch the channels. Right now I'm just going to do it by hand. So, okay, here's the clean channel on the rev. Then we go to channel 2. Crunch channel. And then we can go to channel 3. High gain, first high gain channel. Channel 4. Okay, that's the second high gain channel. Now, without doing anything else, we're going to go back to the SYN-1 foot switch, and we're going to hit the bypass button. Now this is active, and what we've done is we've bypassed all of the preamp stuff on the rev, and now this, we're going direct into here, and then this is going straight into the power amp. So then we can hear the sound of that. And then we can switch to the second channel of this. So now with the addition of the SYN-1 preamp, we have 6 total channels accessible on this amp via foot switch. That is pretty absurd, but probably what this is most useful for is if you have a 1-channel amp, now you have 3 channels available, which is the more likely scenario. But the important thing is that no matter how many channels your amp has, the SYN-1 can add 2 channels to that number. And you're not stuck with 1 preamp sound either. You can swap it out for any of the modules that Synergy makes. I'm definitely a sucker for anything modular, so I really like the idea of being able to swap out modules and get a completely different sound from a bunch of different preamps that they have to offer. I think it could be a solid addition to any studio setting if you're like really picky about guitar tones and you want to have a bunch of them at your disposal and you want to just collect the whole set of all the different preamps and be able to get any of those tones all tube at any given moment. I think it could also be a great addition to your live setup, but it is a tiny bit impractical in that it's just sort of sits on top of your amp. It's not rack mountable. You need 4 cables total to hook it up, and that's in addition to your like effects and if, you know, pedal board or multi-effects model or whatever you've got, it's gonna be just adding a little bit of more setup to your live rig. You know, you have to take that into account. Anyway, I hope that gives you an idea of how the SYN-1 works and what it's good for, who it's aimed at, and I think really it meets the goals of everything that it's set out to do. I think it sounds really awesome, and of course it's gonna sound completely different depending on what module you're using, so it'll change based on what you need and what kind of sounds you like. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, mash that subscribe button for more reviews and original content, and I'll see you real soon.